Welcome to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton, where we equip pastors to take their churches from declining to thriving by pointing them to a new future and a new hope. Join us weekly for encouragement and practical advice in your pastoring journey.
Hey, welcome to Revitalize and Replant. I am Mark Clifton. This is Mark Hallock.
Hey,
we
what's
are
up?
here at Linwood, Kansas, and today we're going to do things. Do not neglect these things in church revitalization.
Yeah. What
Pastor,
not to do? What not to do?
What not to do? Do not, Pastor, do not. These are so important, and we know they're important because Mark and I have done all of them.
Oh, man, we've made all these mistakes.
Now, they're not in any particular order, but these are things you do not want to do in church revitalization, things you do not want to neglect in church revitalization.
Yep.
Number one, Hallock.
Number one is this: don't make change too quickly.
I know, we say that all the time.
But it's so important to come back to.
We have to say it all the time because you guys keep doing it all the
We
time.
got to keep talking about it.
We walk into a place, and I know how that is. I want to change everything.
You and I both love change.
I love change.
Yes,
I
so do I.
thrive on change.
I love it.
I want to change the bulletin. I want to change the way the chairs are set up. I want to change the music. I want to change everything. Fight that urge when you first go to a church, and what you want to do is love your people and be patient with your people and care for your people and get to know your people and get to know the community and let your family adjust to the new place. Look, when you go to a new place, first of all, you got to realize your family is mourning the loss of an old place. Even if things weren't good at the other church, another location where you were, there were some relationships there. So help your family deal with those, and then help them find some new relationships and some new joys in the new place that they're at. Spend that first year or two loving your own family because they're going to need it in the days and years to come in revitalization.
That's right.
Loving your church, getting to know them. Loving your community, getting to know them. Loving on your association, your director of missions, your state convention, and getting to know them before you worry about making a bunch of changes.
Dude, totally.
It's much better for them to say, your church to say, aren't we going to make some changes? Yeah, we're going to get there eventually. Then for them to say, how come you're making so many changes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen, you got to make friends before you make change. That's the bottom line. You got friends to make. Here's number two.
I need to go get another Diet Coke out of the fridge.
Okay.
So you go
I
ahead
got
and
this.
talk,
Let's do
and
it.
I'm going to go get a Diet
Listen,
Coke out of the
don't
fridge.
ignore
By
the
way,
needs.
It's the vending machine. So you got some change?
Yeah, sure.
Hang on. You got some?
There you go.
All right, I'll be right back.
You got it. Okay.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, listen, number two.
Can
don't
I get you anything?
Well, yeah, a Coke Zero would be
Okay,
great.
I'll get you a Coke Zero.
Okay.
How about you, Kyle? You want anything? You all good?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
All
I'll
right.
take this. You got it. We'll see
You got
you.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll see you in a bit.
Grab something fun to eat too. A snack or something. Okay, number two. Don't ignore the needs of your community and your context. And this is just huge, man. We've talked about this, but you've got to have a missionary mindset. I mean, like I'm going to this church, obviously to love these people, to preach the word. But man, there are people lost and need Christ. They need the gospel right around this church. And so I need to study this community. I need to know this community. What are the needs of this community? And then how can I lead our people? This is the leadership piece, to actually begin to engage the community through service. Just let them know, man, we love you. We're for you. Engage the community with the gospel. Engage the community through invitation. We'd love for you to come be part of what we're doing at our church. And so don't ignore the needs
So what did I miss?
of your community. Here's what it is. We're getting ready to go to number three.
Well, I want to stay on number two, but
Okay,
I just
well,
got back from the vending machine.
Listen, we got 7 to get through, pal.
right.
I just hit number 2. Don't
Well, I will
ignore
say-
the needs.
Well, number two is don't ignore
Of
the
your
needs
community.
I
Okay.
think what we do need to say is this: as Sam Rayner has said, your church's address is no accident. And
yep.
you listen. I mean this with everything I got, guys. If you do not seek to reach the community in which your church is located, then don't mess with revitalizing a church.
Just don't even go there.
Don't even go there. Because basically, you're not going to be a regional church. There are already regional churches out there. And they're going to reach, you need to reach that community. And you cannot reach the community if you don't know the community.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't mean just, I mean know it like the back of your hand.
Yeah.
So take that first year or two and get to know the community. You cannot neglect the needs in your community. And one of the ways you can do that is by hooking up with every nonprofit in your county and find out how they're serving the needs in that community. We could go on and on, but don't neglect the needs of your community.
I love it.
All
I love
right.
it. Number 3, man, this is big. Don't fail to ask for help.
man. Asking for help, acknowledge you need help. So it's a
And we all do.
It's a humble thing,
Yep.
right? But when I say asking for help, I mean asking for help from a director of missions. Try this one on. Say I'm a 64-year-old pastor, like I am, but I need some help from a 22-year-old church planter. Because
That's right.
this young church planter, man, he's got some vision, and his people are engaged in reaching the community, and they're doing. I need to go sit down with that 22-year-old church planter in one of those weird tea milk hot places. I had one of them take me there one time here in Kansas City. I wanted to meet him. He took me to some place that was like a chai tea place with hot milk and stuff. I went up and asked for a Diet Coke, and the kid up there said, "We don't serve pop or soda here." Okay.
He didn't know what to say.
I didn't know what to say. So, I mean, let him take you to a place like
There's
that.
stuff you can learn.
But you sat there, and I learned from that young man
Yep.
about vision, about reaching the community. You've got to be willing to reach out and say, dude, I may be twice your age, but there's some things I don't know that you know. You got to go to the director of missions in your association and say, man, our church needs some help with this. Are there other churches that can help us? Yeah. You got to get out there and do that.
And
you got to acknowledge
let me
help.
say this too. So you're 64, right?
I am.
Okay, I'm 47.
Yeah.
And I would say to the 40-year-olds in here, guys, listen, I know you still think you're a young pastor. You're not young anymore. Like sometimes I forget, like, dude, I'm going to be 50 in a few years.
You're not.
So this isn't like you're like, well, these old guys don't get it. Listen, you're one of the old guys now.
Right.
That's just the bottom line.
That's right.
So, dude, you need to listen. I'm saying amen to everything you're saying.
Don't neglect asking for help.
Dude, that's right. That's right. Here's number four. Don't have, we've talked a lot about this is good. Don't have any non-negotiables except for sound doctrine in the gospel.
That's right.
So in other words, you better be willing to try some stuff and you're going to fail.
That's right.
But that's okay. You got to keep trying stuff.
That's right. And you got to lead your congregation over a period of years, not weeks, to get to the place where they say, we come with open hands, and whatever Jesus wants to do with his church, he can do with it.
Yeah.
If he wants to share it with it, if he wants us to share it with another congregation, if he wants us to become a campus of another congregation, if he wants me to leave as the pastor so that a church planter can come in here and adopt this church, I've got to be open to whatever
the Lord wants.
This is where revitalization often stops.
Yeah.
Because guys have some non-negotiables. We can't change the name. I've got to stay as the pastor. We can't move that. You've got to say, other than theology and sound doctrine and the gospel, this belongs to Jesus, and this is his church,
Dude,
and he
that's
can
true.
do with whatever he wants.
That's so good. Man, that's good. Number 5, and this is really important. Don't neglect the pain it will cause your people. Don't neglect the pain.
Know that when you're going through this change, there's a sense of real grief and mourning for what they're losing. The familiarity of the church as they've known it, all the memories related to that, all of those things. It is a real grieving process for them. And allow them to grieve and walk through that mourning with them. And don't be angry with them about that.
Don't take it personally.
No, and if they kind of push back at you and get a little snarky with you, understand that they're coming from a place of hurt and pain, and allow them to do that and be a soft place for them to land. But don't ignore the pain and the mourning that this is going to cost some folks when these drastic changes come to their church.
Good word. Number 6, another thing, don't neglect the impact on your family.
I know, and don't undersell it. When you're ready to either go to a church to be a revitalizing pastor, or you've committed that you're going to work with this church you're at now to do revitalization, sit down with your wife and your children and say, look, Lord seems to be calling me to do this kind of ministry here, and it's going to be the hardest thing we've ever done as a family. And let me tell you what we can expect. We can expect Satan to come at us financially, emotionally, physically. We can expect all kinds of antagonism from some of the people we love at the church. This is going to be really, really hard. Don't undersell it to your family, and help them be prepared for it and get their feedback from it. And then find ways, I've said this almost in so many podcasts, but I've done it personally with my own family. Find ways to find good churches in your region. This goes about asking for help, where you can maybe let your kids go to RAs or GAs or Awanas at another church so they can experience what it means to be at another church with some healthy kids and some healthy workers. Ask if there's a church nearby that has a Thursday night small group in a home. You and your wife can be part of that Thursday night small group, and she can be ministered to there. If you're going through this revitalization, church is not always going to be a wonderfully sweet place. Some people are going to be pretty unhappy about things, and your family needs to be taken care of. Do not ignore them through this.
Man, that's awesome. And this leads to number 7. I mean, we could have a list of 20 things, but I think these are 7 really important things. And this is something you and I are both so passionate about. Don't neglect the importance of Christ-centered preaching.
Right. When you've got to help them understand this church belongs to Jesus, not to them.
Yep.
And you've got to help them understand their salvation is totally dependent not on what they've done for that church in the last 40 years, but on what Jesus has done for them in the last 40 seconds.
Amen.
He's the one that's purchased
good.
And continues to purchase their salvation. This church may be important to them. They may have given their money here. They may have worked here all their life, but they didn't buy it with their blood, and it's not their bride. It belongs to Jesus, and it's his bride, and they will give an account to him. So how do you do that? Every week you preach the cross. Every week you preach Jesus. You say, how do you do that? Well, you find Jesus throughout all the Old Testament. There's all kinds of great books out there, Pastor, you can look at that says Jesus in the Old Testament. You can preach Christ in the Old Testament, preach Christ in the New Testament. And as Spurgeon said, preach the cross in every message. If you can't get there, jump a hedge and get there anyway. Find one, because these people need to hear over and over and over the power of the cross.
Amen.
Christ has done it. This is his church.
Yep.
They've had too many sermons many times that have been about them. They're the focus of the sermon.
Yeah.
And they need to understand Jesus is the focus of what we
Moralism.
do. And yes,
moralism. That's right.
and
Whatever
all
it might be.
Whatever it might be. So Christ-centered preaching.
Preach Christ.
Preach Christ. Now, look, if you've been in a church for 30 years or 20 years or 5 years even, and your church is on a pretty good track, you can do some other kinds of preaching. I'm not saying it's the only kind. Of course, you always should preach Christ in your messages. But I mean, you need to be intentional in the first year or two of revitalization to preach Christ, preach Christ, preach Christ. And intentional in the songs that you sing. To talk about the redemption of Jesus and the forgiveness of Jesus. Because to the degree that they're going to make the transition in revitalization is to the degree that they trust you as their shepherds. You got to be a good pastor to them. And to the degree they realize how much they owe to Christ, and this church belongs to him. So don't neglect the preaching of Christ in church revitalization.
Love it. 7 things.
All right, there they are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. We do love you. Please subscribe to this podcast, and honestly, share it with some other people on social media and around. If you think it's helpful to you, hopefully it'll be helpful for some other people. And Kyle and I and Dan Hurst and Mark Hallock, we work real hard at this, and we care deeply for you. Check us out at churchreplanters.com.
Thanks for joining us today on Revitalize and Replant. This podcast is brought to you by the North American Mission Board, where we help dying or struggling churches regain health for the glory of God and the good of their communities. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. To learn more about becoming a replanting pastor, or to explore resources about revitalization for your own church, visit churchreplanters.com.